So you might have seen my intro where I opened up with a question. And this question, of course, relates to whether anyone has experienced working in a toxic workplace or toxic working environment. So the whole point of today's video is to basically talk about toxic workplaces as well as certain things that I've seen in my 6 years of working. Now, of course, if you are like me, in which you are autistic or you have some sort of social deficiency or even some other form of neurodivergence, you may notice that it's very difficult to maintain consistent employment. In my case, I've been very lucky in the sense that I've managed to stay employed without being fired from a job. Because the thing is with autism and the workplace, certain things just don't really mix very well, if I make sense. So I guess what I'm saying is the point of today's video is to not only share some of my experiences with you all, but to also kind of try my best to give as much advice as possible as to how to deal with these experiences. So before I begin, first off, this is today's outfit or whatever. I did my hair. We have a nice clip-in, which is one of my favorites, although I cannot wear this to work. We have some Kiko Milano makeup, so I have some slight mascara and lipstick because we're experimenting. And then I have one of my favorite shirts or jumpers with Goth Kids from South Park, and the slogan is "Life is Pain," and we have a nice little necklace here. And then of course I have a fresh coat of paint or nail varnish. And before we start, I just want to mention as well that I get very nervous when I talk on camera because I have autism and my social skills are not the strongest, so certain things don't make sense, that's why. I am, however, trying my best to work on building my confidence as I talk, and I do have my phone with me because I have notes, and sometimes having notes just makes things a bit easier. So if I'm just sort of glancing down and stuff like that, it's because I'm looking at notes, because as I mentioned, it's just easier for me to, have notes so I remember things without going off into a tangent, because I do have a tendency to do that a lot. And I also have my pen, so I can just sort of scroll through my notes and things like that. So considering this is going to be a long video, I'm going to be covering lots of things. So we have a shot of some alcoholic drink that I've already forgot the name of. This is called is it Campari? I have no idea. But it has a very strange aftertaste. It tastes like petrol and wood. I don't know. Yeah. It's a very acquired taste. And of course, because I'm a wine girl, I've got a nice glass of Merlot because it's been a long week. And if you're a wine person like me, you also need your wine. So, grab your wine, or if you're a non-alcoholic person, that's okay. Just grab whatever drink you have, whatever snacks you've got, because today is going to be a long one. So, now we can begin. So, when it comes to the modern workplace, right? One thing that I've kind of noticed throughout my 6 years of working is that it's very similar to the school system. So what I mean by this is you have similar things. So with both school and work, you are always going to be in the same place at the same time with the same people, Monday to Friday for 5 days a bloody week. And when it comes down to school, the main purpose is, of course, to learn. But then I think what it is for a lot of people, at least in my case, this was my experience with education as a whole, is that you are not really learning. You are expected to conform. So you have to basically act a certain way. You have to do things a certain way. You have to dress a certain way as well. And it's kind of a similar thing to work, where you're expected to be, let's just say, molded like a piece of clay. So your line manager / employer is trying to sort of, I guess, make you an ideal employee. So they want you to fit a certain template. And if you don't fit that, you're immediately seen as a threat, and then your employer will devise specific strategies to get rid of you. Now, one thing that I've come to notice when it comes to modern workplaces, sorry, I'm getting my notes because, like I said, I have a tendency to sort of forget things, is that with school and work, right, you have someone who's like an authority figure in a sense. So that individual sort of makes decisions for you. So in school, it's your teacher. In the workplace, it's your line manager. So, you know, when it comes to school, you have classes that are sort of mapped out for specific times. So you have a schedule that you have to follow. It's the same thing with the workplace in the sense that you have certain start and finish times for your shift. You have breaks in between as well. So I'm not really sure how lunch breaks work in other countries because obviously I'm from the UK, but here, if you do a full-time job, you're entitled to a 1 hour lunch break. But if, say, you do part-time, you will only get maybe 30 minutes. So when I used to work part-time before moving to full-time, I would only have a 30-minute lunch break. And it didn't really feel like a lunch break because the time would just go by so quick. So when you sort of look at the people as well, right? One thing you also notice is that the people you deal with in school are the same people you deal with at work. So, you know, look back at your experience with the education system. Just, you know, have that visual memory playing in your head. You see the students that you used to hang around with, right? Those same students become your colleagues. And if you are someone who was bullied at school, who was an outcast or an introvert or something like that, you are typically the target for those bullies. And those exact same bullies become either human resources representatives or fucking managers. And of course, they have this kick for abusing their power to their advantage. So, you know, a lot of these individuals who are in these positions within the workplace hierarchy, they use bullying and intimidation to get what they want out of the staff. And once the staff feel threatened, they will willingly comply with whatever they want. So, you know, if your line manager asks you to jump off a cliff, right, you know, you are not really going to say how high that is if you're somebody who is going to question the manager, which is basically me, even though I am a quiet person. But instead, if you're weak and the line manager sees that, you'll be the person that jumps off that cliff because they told you to do it. So in your eyes, everything they say and do is correct, even though there are certain things that you should really question. So, you know, basically, as I mentioned, what workplaces want to do is to sort of transform you into this compliant individual who just shuts up, does their job, doesn't do anything but their job, and, you know, anything the line manager says, you've got to fucking do it because that's just how they are. So now we're going to get on to the types of managers that you will encounter in the workplace. And oh boy, this is going to be a good one, especially because I have a few experiences of encountering some funny line managers myself. So, in my 6 years of working, one thing that I've sort of picked up on is that it's very rare to encounter decent line managers. Now, don't get me wrong, my line manager in my current job may have her ways sometimes, but one thing I can definitely say that's positive is that she's no nonsense, she's very straight up, and I'm one of those people that wants to deal with direct individuals. I don't know if this is because of the autism, but for me personally, I would rather you tell me something to my face than go behind my back. Because I mean, when I used to go to school, I actually had some very unfortunate experiences where I used to be friends with certain individuals who would say one thing in front of my face and then talk shit about me behind my back. And I don't really like that kind of behavior because I think it's very juvenile and I think it's very fake. So I remember I used to be in this particular friendship group where one of the girls was like this towards me and I didn't even do anything. So sometimes during break she'd be like, oh, can you just, go over there? And she would just talk shit, complete shit about me. And it's like, if you've got a problem with me, I'd rather you tell me than just, go behind my back, because that's fake. That's just fake behavior and I don't like that. I've had enough of that demonic bullshit, demonic energy in my life, and I'm not putting up with it again. So I'm just gonna give you a, let's just say, breakdown of the types of line managers you'll encounter. So before I go off into a tangent again, let's get back into the topic, shall we? So for me personally, what makes a decent line manager is someone who will advocate for their staff, somebody who is direct with the staff, and someone who just says things as it is. So when it comes to my current job, my manager is aware that I'm autistic and is also aware that I need direct instruction. So, when you're giving me instructions, I need you to be very clear and specific on what you want me to do. And if there's something I'm unsure of, I clarify things with my manager, and I'm the same way with my colleagues, most of which who are aware I'm autistic. And before I sort of get into the whole list of types of line managers you'll encounter, I suppose, being autistic and working, it's actually been a bit of a weird experience, but a positive one where I work at the moment, because I've never really had any discrimination or anything like that. I mean, I know neurodivergent people in my workplace as well. So one of my colleagues has ADHD, another colleague has, I think, dyspraxia. And in my previous job, I knew a colleague that had ADHD as well. And I think what it is, it's like, I've had lots of people in my current job ask me lots of questions about what it's like being autistic and working, and also, just asking me for advice on how to support their young people who are autistic and stuff. And it's actually quite a refreshing thing knowing I can contribute my life experiences in some way, because I really want to sort of make a difference to the lives of autistic people, if that makes sense. Okay, so let me just get back into topic, because this is the problem that I have all the time. I'm just going off into a tangent and I do apologize, but I think my brain is kind of working overtime. So, in terms of the decent line managers that you'll encounter, not only will they advocate for their staff, they will also see your potential. So if they see that you've got transferable skills that can be utilized in some way, they'll say, hey, you, I noticed that you're good at graphic design. How about doing some reprographics materials for the company? So I don't know, you could promote some booklets about the services, because I've done little bits and pieces myself in my current job, just little booklets where I've sort of promoted the service and things like that. So as of recently, I did a recipe booklet for young people so they know how to make smoothies, just quick recipes to help them utilize their cooking skills and things like that, if that makes sense. So, my point is, if you have a decent line manager that can really bring out your potential, that is somebody you definitely want to work for, because they know that you can do something great for the company. They know that you have lots to offer. But like I said before, it's very rare to get line managers who are like this. So the following types of line managers that you'll often encounter include the weak or passive type. So you know the little wallflowers that are like wallpaper, they're just there in the background. These types of line managers do not have a backbone in their body whatsoever. So what they will sort of do when there's confrontation or issues within upper management is they'll just sort of, just stay in the background, or where necessary, they will throw you under the bus in order to make themselves look good, because they're afraid of looking bad in front of, the directors/CEOs. And sometimes as well, these types of line managers are also very lenient with the staff. So they just let them do whatever, because again, they're so afraid of confrontation, it gets to a point where they just give in. And for me personally, being a manager means you need to have some form of mental toughness and tenacity. So if people see that you're weak, they can use that to their advantage, because they know they will get whatever the fuck they want out of you. Then of course you have one of the worst types of line managers, which are of course the micromanaging types. So these individuals are the ones who want to know every little thing that goes on in the office or in the workplace, from who comes in late because of train delays to who hasn't done the recent team meeting minutes. So these people have their weird mannerisms when it comes to extracting information out of you or other employees, right? So the following things that they sort of do include sitting in a specific area so that they can see the clock. And technically in my current job, we do have a manager who has these weird little tendencies. So, like I said, they sit in a specific area in an office, and I'm going to be using office examples because that's most of my work history. So, they stare at the clock like this, and then they sort of monitor exactly how long it takes for you to come into work. And on top of that, micromanagers even have extra funny ways of doing things. So in my previous job, right, we had an operations manager who was like this. So every time she came into the office, she would hover over your desk and ask you questions about your work. So I remember when my colleagues and I were tasked with finding CVs for potential candidates for a deputy manager role. And mind you, this role did not pay much and there were no benefits. So when it came to this task, the operations manager, she would literally just walk in. She would hover over your desk and she'd be like, "Oh, buri, how many CVs did you get? How many CVs did you get?" And I was just sitting on the desk, just scrambling around looking for the fucking folder, because she's asking me all these questions at rapid speed, right? And that's how some of these micromanagers are. They will ask you so many questions about what you're doing. They will literally hover over your desk to the point where they are in your peripheral, right? And some of these micromanagers will even go as far as just, slyly looking over at your monitor like this. And they just, just be like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing? Are you doing your work? Are you typing those minutes? Oh, you're doing shopping. That's the disciplinary." So, they just like to sort of, just hover over your desk, especially in an open plan environment. And that environment is a fucking bonus, because let me tell you, lots of offices now are open plan. So basically what that means is you can see everybody's desk, you don't have cubicles, you have hot desking, which is where you have random desks. And that is a bonus for the micromanagers, because they can just hover over, just, slyly watching you, just checking that you're not doing shopping or other non-work related stuff. Or if they feel like it, as they're going to the printer to print something, if your desk is right next to the printing area, they can just kind of, watch or wait for their stuff to print as they just look at everything you're doing. So those are little things they do in the workplace. And if, say, you're working in, certain industries like the call center industry, or you're working from home, there's even software that can track your movements. So you have some micromanagers that will track when you're going to the toilet and how long you take, or they will use software to check your availabilities, because you've got programs or systems like Microsoft Teams and such now, so obviously they will track every little fucking thing you're doing, because that's just how they are. Then, of course, you have micromanagers in general that will even go as far as using software to track when you clock in and out of the building, because of course, why not? Why not have extra surveillance? Do you know what I mean? So besides the micromanagers, right, you also have individuals in management positions who are not qualified for the job, because they don't know what's happening in the company at all. They barely have any knowledge of what's going on, and of course they're the types that are just basically not there. So in my second job in particular, the managers were like this, because what they would do is practically every month they would go on holidays using money they actually pocketed from staff for the employee expenses. And I'm not shitting you, this actually happened where I used to work. So when staff would come in to pay for things like their DBS, which is a disclosure and barring certificate for any type of job that comes under working with vulnerable individuals. So for a bit of context, my previous job was in the care industry, so that's why I had to carry out those checks. Then, of course, the staff had to pay for training, they had to pay for their own uniform, things like that. So the managers would keep the cash, as they only did cash payments in this envelope. And this envelope was in the operation manager's desk drawer, and anybody, including cleaners, could access that because we didn't have a safe. So there was no secure system which allowed you to access these things. So basically, right, they would use the cash to cover holiday expenses, hence why they were hardly present in the office. So like I said, that's how my line managers were in my old place. So, they had no idea what was happening. They expected my team and I to deal with their issues, because there were many times where staff would just go off on one about things that had nothing to do with us, like not being paid on time, which we didn't have control over because we did not manage accounts. We didn't manage payroll, it was somebody else. So, we would always get the brunt of everything, and the managers barely helped us. My colleagues and I had to basically help each other because the fucking managers weren't there. So yeah, you have managers that are like that are either not qualified to do their job, or they act like they know what they're doing when they don't. And because they are up here and you are down here, technically in their eyes, you will be inferior, and you're always going to be inferior to them. And then, of course, you've got line managers who don't even like it when you possess too much knowledge in a certain area, because then they feel threatened, since you're either going to go to another company or you will take their job. So they want to keep you at this level because they don't want to replace you. They want to keep you here, and they will do everything possible to keep you here, right? And another thing I kind of noticed, and this mainly applies to my second job, is if you're a creative person, so I'm a creative person, I love doing art, I always have done, you will have managers that will try to sort of suppress that out of you. So if you suggest interesting ideas to help improve a company, they don't really like that because they're used to doing things a certain way. So in their eyes, it's like, oh, okay, well, as great as this suggestion is, we're not implementing that. No way. We're going to do things this way because this is the only way to do things. So they don't even want to, do anything new. They just kind of want to do things the way they're used to doing it, if that makes sense. So yeah. Now, of course, besides the line managers, you will also encounter different types of colleagues or employees. And when you really analyze the workplace, if that makes sense, you realize it's a fucking test. So it's like school, where you have social situations where you're going to be tested based on how you react to certain things. And for me, being autistic, I'm really shit at picking up social cues, which is why I don't like office politics. I mean, I haven't really been involved in things like that because I'm one of those people that just comes in, does their job and goes home. Because for me, I don't want to engage in drama, especially because if I say something or do something that doesn't look good, that can backfire on me. So I'd rather just stay in the car, do what I need to do and go home and not take the stress home. So, I mean, I've had colleagues, you know, sort of come up to me before and they're like, oh, hey, buri, I don't like this person because they do X or Y. So, you know, they just talk to me about issues they have with others. And I'm just like, okay, you know, cool. Because I don't want to say anything that backfires, do you know what I mean? So when it comes to, you know, employees or colleagues or whatever, your line manager, who is basically your employer, they want to know exactly what type of individuals they'll get when they set foot in the workplace. So of course you have two types of employees. So for comparison purposes, we've got type A and we have type B, or it's probably the other way around. So the type A, oh, it's 4 o'clock already. Sorry, I'm distracted. So the type A employees, right? These are the ones who, as I mentioned earlier, they just go to work, act professional, do what they need to do, go fuck home and get paid. So these types don't take their work stress home with them. They work smarter and not harder. And they realize that their job is not their whole life. But the problem is most employers or line managers hate these individuals because in their eyes, they're either not a team player or they have some sort of hidden agenda that is like, I don't know, hiding something in bloody MI5, because that's how they think, okay? So you also have certain types of employees that are the opposite, which are the type Bs. So these types are the ones employers like because they do certain things in terms of going the extra mile. So they go above and beyond to showcase how much of a team player they are and how they're beneficial to the company, especially because when there are certain opportunities, they want to showcase how hard they work so they have a good word put in for them. So, you know, if you've got promotions or pay increases, of course people are going to change in order to get up here, right? So you've got employees who will take on overtime, whether it's mandatory or not. You know, you've got those individuals that will willingly put themselves forward because they think that they're going to get certain opportunities when in reality the employer is going to give them more work. So, you know, I remember in my second job, I used to go above and beyond, and let me tell you, that was a mistake. So, I mean, I remember once I was called into work on a day off that I booked well in advance because I wanted to spend time with my mum on her birthday. And this was to help my team prepare for an inspection that was taking place in the main office. So technically I should have said, no, I'm not coming in because I booked a day off that you approved. So I shouldn't have to come in. But because I was 22 when I did this job at the time, I was kind of in this stage where I was kind of afraid of questioning management. So I just kind of did as they said, you know. And I remember coming in, helping my team as much as I could. And I didn't have a break. I was just eating little snacks like sushi and stuff like that on my desk. And this was one of the worst working days I'd experienced because the stress got to me. I was crying in the toilet because we had literally half a day to do 2+ years worth of work due to a server crash in the manager's supported living home. And I was crying to my aunt in the toilet because I was stressed. So she told me to do whatever I could, and if I wanted to quit the job, just quit the job. But the reason I didn't quit was because it would have taken me quite a while to find another job, because I mean, the current job I'm in now, it took me 6 to 7 months to find it. So my best plan was to just stay employed as I was looking for another job, because at least then I could be a bit more picky rather than just taking the first thing that came and ending up in another toxic workplace. So I was just kind of trying to tough it out, which probably wasn't the best thing to do, but of course that was my mindset at the time. So I mean, like I said, you do have employees that go the extra mile. So, you know, they not only do overtime and things like that, because I used to do that a lot in my old job, they also don't take breaks. So, you know, sometimes you have employees that will literally sit on a desk and continue working as if nothing else around them is going on. And they don't have a break. They might go to the toilet or just have a quick smoke to relieve the stress, but there are no breaks. They just immediately come back to the desk and just continue working. Then, of course, you have the informant types that sort of tell the employer everything. So, you know, they want to do that to get into the good books. So they'll just spy on other staff or employees or whatever and then report back to the employer, because obviously, again, if there are certain opportunities, they will want to take advantage. Now, when it comes to certain types of individuals, there are those who like to get involved in gossip and drama. So, you know, you have individuals that sort of peaked in school. They like to gossip about you and things like that. And, you know, some people at work will ask you all these invasive questions about your personal life because they want to sort of figure out the competition. So, you know, sometimes you've got those types. I'm not saying this has necessarily happened to me, but for a lot of people in general, you have certain individuals that want to like ask you personal questions about your life because they want to find out who you are and they want to see if your life is better than theirs, because sometimes you do have people who are so insecure they take that out on others because clearly there's something they're not happy about. And then of course you have those that make their job their whole life. So this whole little thing, this whole kick of misery is their whole bloody life because there's nothing significant going on. And, you know, when it comes to these types of situations, you really do have to be careful of what you say and do, because in most cases, if you say the wrong thing or you do the wrong thing, then that's you at risk of either losing your job or being ousted out. And I mean, again, if you are like me, where you have autism, you might have had those experiences, because I mean, one thing I'm going to say, and I know this is going to sound very harsh, is if you have some kind of disability, and again, these things haven't necessarily happened to me, but because I used to do recruitment, I suppose it gives me an idea of what employers want and don't want, because a lot of employers, right, and I'm going to tell you this coming from my experience of doing recruitment in the past, you know, they want people who are compliant. They want people who will shut up, do what they need to do and not question anything, like I said in the beginning. So they don't really want people who will challenge them, because then it's like their authority is not taken seriously, if that makes sense. And if you have a disability as well, and people pick up on that and they see how different you are, they will try and get rid of you, because unfortunately, there are many experiences where people with disabilities, whether physical or hidden, have been let go, because in an employer's eyes, the individual will cost more to keep in terms of accommodations, and then there could be situations where the disability hinders their ability to work, if that makes sense. So if, say, you're like me, where you're autistic and you're working in a heavily social job, so, you know, if you're working as a receptionist, and I'm using my job as an example because it's just easier, and I don't know, a client or a customer's been rude to you and you go into a complete meltdown, your employer or line manager is going to look at that and say, well, you cannot handle the job. And what they will do without telling you is they're going to kind of, just pull you aside. They're just going to be like, come here, I need to talk to you. And then they're going to sort of say that you're not a good culture fit. So they will use certain terms to sort of skate around discrimination, if that makes sense, because it's better for them to do that so that they don't outright discriminate, if that makes sense, because a lot of employers are very sneaky with how they do things. So, they kind of use little things to skirt around discrimination laws, even though you have the 2010 Equality Act, which is supposed to apply to protect characteristics, like disability. So, they'll just kind of skirt around that as much as they can to get rid of you so that you don't have a case. And then you kind of go through the process of looking for another job again. And for a lot of people, whether you have a disability or not, they do go through this process. I mean, I'm going through the process again where I'm experiencing burnout, and I've been in my current job for 2 years now, almost 2.5 years. And I'm just like, this job is just boring me. I want to do something else. I need a job closer to home because my commute, which is an hour door to door, it just does my head in. So I'm trying to look for another job. And here we go. We're going through the process. We're going through the motions. And it's just like, there is no end in sight. And a lot of people I know are experiencing this, like myself. You're just doing this, It's like you're on a hamster wheel and you can't get off. And you want to get off, but you can't get off. So, the term jack of all trades, master of none? Well, technically this applies because you see when you read the job description and you have certain jobs that outline the duties, and then you have unknown or surprise duties, if that makes sense, which don't come under that. Well, that's your employer's way of trying to get you to do more whilst being paid less, because it's very common now where you have skeleton crews where employers expect you to do more work. So in most cases, you might have small teams, and I know because most of the jobs I've done, or all the jobs I've done, I've worked in small teams. You get paid less to do more work. So again, where I used to work before, I was in a small team with 3 other people, and I remember every time somebody left, the other person ended up getting the extra work. So I remember people were dropping like flies in the office. So you had the senior HR admin going for maternity and not coming back. My colleague and I were dividing her work between us as we did our own work. So we were basically doing the work of 2 people each. And then when my colleague resigned abruptly, and this was actually due to a certain situation that happened when I wasn't there, because I remember when she resigned, I was signed off due to depression because I had bereavement issues and my job at the time caused me stress. So I remember meeting up with my ex-colleague a few months later because, like I said, I'm still in touch with my colleagues from my old place, and she told me she left because there was something the general manager, who was our line manager, said that she didn't like. So, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm surprised, but the way things happened was just kind of sad. And I'm not going to go into too much details out of respect, for my ex-colleague, who is now a friend, of course. But yeah, there were certain things that were said that really made her just go abruptly. And I didn't blame her, because if you're in that kind of environment, you have to get out. So, you just have to. And then of course I left, and then my other senior left. So everyone left, as in everyone I worked with in the office besides myself, because of the managers. So I mean, the managers were basically getting you to do more work, because when my colleague left, right, I did the work of 3 people. I was doing admin, I was doing HR, I was training staff, and I was getting paid minimum wage. And I even trained her replacement, who got £2 more than me, and they didn't even speak English. And the reason they got put in this role was because they were permanent staff. They had to be prioritised for jobs due to the visa sponsorship, if I recall. And when I was trying to delegate duties, the managers would pass them back to me. So their excuse was, oh, buri, well, they don't know how to do this, so you have to do it. So I was doing everything. And I even had the managers calling me out of hours, right? Even when I took 2 weeks off to help my family with the tiling of my cousin's grave after my cousin was stabbed to death, mind you. And, you know, they were calling me about work when they knew I had bereavement issues. And this is what they would do. They would pile on more work and they would drive you to absolute stress. And this is common in a lot of jobs now, where you are driven to so much stress, it's to a point where you end up quitting. And that was what happened to me, and that was what happened to my colleagues as well, because my ex-colleague that I worked with, who was an admin assistant, right, she had, I think she had ADHD. She just didn't get the diagnosis until I think it was last year or something, and she, like me, was neurodivergent, so she kind of had her own issues in terms of like doing multiple tasks and stuff like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not knowledgeable on ADHD, I'm really sorry. But yeah, so basically she would need like a body double, I think, when it came to doing certain tasks at work, because she would struggle with multitasking and things like that. And I think that was kind of a trigger as well in terms of why she left, because clearly the job was not neurodivergent friendly, because you had all these different things. And I think, if I'm not wrong, if you have ADHD, it's very difficult to sort of focus on multiple things and stuff like that. So yeah, that was what happened. So right, I think that's everything I've covered, because this video is getting long because I've waffled on so much and I haven't realised, so I do apologise. But I'm hoping everything I said makes sense. And personally, when it comes to dealing with toxic workplaces, my advice is to not engage with the drama. Just try to like detach yourself from your job as much as you can, and just remind yourself that your job is not your bloody life. I'm not saying don't care, I'm just saying you need to detach yourself to a certain point, because if you don't, you're just taking so much on, and it's not fair on your physical health or your mental health. So for me, you know, one thing I don't do anymore is bring my work home. So as soon as I log off, my shift is done, I'm going home, I'm not thinking about the office until the next day. And the same applies to weekends and time off, especially because now in my current job, I can actually enjoy my time off knowing nobody will contact me about work. Because in my old job, if I had time off or even if I was sick, the managers will contact me, and that actually gave me a lot of stress to the point where I had to confront the operations manager. And when I did that, she basically said that every company is like this, which is bullshit, and that I needed to learn how to handle pressure. So, you know, the managers would just kind of gaslight you into thinking you couldn't handle certain things because that's what they were like. So in my old workplace, which is what I'm referring to when I'm saying this, they were the types to act friendly when clearly they did not care about anything besides themselves. So yeah. But anyway, just detach yourself from your job, just go in, do your job, go home. Don't even engage in the drama, because the minute you do that, that's when they're going to use things against you. So just don't engage, you know. I'm going to end this here because I'm hungry and I think my camera battery's dying. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. And let me know what you think about this video. I mean, have you ever had any toxic workplace experiences? Just put in whatever you want in the comments and enjoy your wine, because that's important. So, bye.